Welcome to Music and Medicine. Welcome to Music and Medicine. Welcome to Music and Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Moshe Lewis. Welcome to Music and Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Moshe Lewis. Today is a special day because I'm with my friend, Kiki Finley. She's CEO of Point Blank Management. She is into music publishing, and from the time that we first met, I've really been trying to understand more about sort of the true business of medicine and the business, in this case, of music and how it's done. So I'm trying to learn both, but she's gonna teach us about the latter. And so tell me about just how you even got into, we'll do the business first, then music, and then starting your own company.
So in the 90s, I was an actor. Went to performing arts high school, was rebellious, got kicked out, moved to New York, and did musical theater, right? So I toured all over the country, did that whole thing, and realized, I don't want to be on the camera. I don't want to be on the stage. And so I realized that my strength was behind the scenes. So I got into film and television and producing, AKA trash TV, AKA reality TV, right? But I also was a makeup artist by accident. So I've kind of done all sorts of things under the umbrella of entertainment. But what introduced me to music publishing was working in post-production as a story producer. And so I would work with the editors and do that whole process and realize, okay, you know, I got into learning about clearances and getting permission to use intellectual property for certain scenes and so forth and so on. So I also realized during that process that there weren't a lot of women in that space.
And especially black women as well.
If you black or any ethnicity of color, you in the single-digit percentile. So there just weren't a lot of representation in music as it relates to composing for film and TV projects. So I says, oh, you know, this is it. So somebody need to represent for the girls.
Exactly. So let's unpack that, because you used a lot of big words that not everybody may know because they're not in the business. So you talked about that whole post-production process. And so take us through that and sort of what it looks like and what happens sort of after film wraps or a TV show wraps.
So I would be on the set and take the notes and draft what they call a hot sheet. And the hot sheet is with all of the notes of the scene. So because I was a segment producer and a story producer. So I would, you know, draft the hot sheet, take those notes and work with the editor in putting together the scene. So we would actually work in softwares like Avid. You know, Avid was one of the ones that I worked with. So I would cut, you know, just create a folder with all of the juicy pieces of a scene, and then work with the editor, take our notes, and we literally put the scene together. Again, during that process, you know, music is involved. You know, underscore and all of the sound design is involved in that as well. So I became more interested in that aspect of post-production versus putting the scene together.
And who are some of the actors and maybe some of the projects that you worked on early on?
I have worked on a few Animal Planet projects. It's Mia the dog. Let's see, some Food Network projects. Ridiculous Cakes was one of them, where we would literally make life-size people, but they were edible. They were cakes. I worked on that. I worked with the latest Judge Judy show, the new Judy Justice. Worked with Judge Judy. Real Atlanta Housewives. Worked with the Housewives with the first 2 seasons when they were trashier than they are now. My opinion. But it was fun. It was fun. Yeah. So I worked on quite a few things.
And do you have the sense that sort of all these things were pushing you and little by little getting you towards starting your own company?
It did. I realized that I don't like being told what to do.
You know what I mean? Honesty.
I don't like being told what to do. Now, I'm not saying I can't be led. A leader can be led. But at the end of the day, I think I'm more of an advocate for inequities and, you know, the underdog. And I just felt like women, especially women of color, was the underdog in the music publishing,
Right.
and sync licensing. That's what it's called. Yeah.
Sure. So I want to tease that out. So you work with a lot of female composers, and so they may write a song or be asked to write music for a movie, video game, TV show. And so walk us sort of through that process, literally from the time that you may get that call.
So I'll get what they call is a brief. A brief is what the music supervisor of a movie or a television show or an ad company, that is just the brief synopsis of what they want, what they want it to sound like, the genre, the terms of the contract, what the budget is, the territory that it's going to be featured. So I'll take the brief, and I will then see if I have in my repertoire, based upon who I represent, if I have any music that would fit that brief. If I don't, that's when I go on a scout and look for music artists that have music that could fit the brief. So if I have something, I'll put a playlist together.
Sure.
Nothing more than about 5 or 6 songs.
Right.
And we'll put the playlist together, and then we'll submit it to the music supervisor.
Sure.
If they like it, then they move forward with that process. But if they don't, and a lot of times they don't, because they have so many people they're submitting these briefs to.
Right.
I mean, hundreds and thousands of people are into sync now, especially since the pandemic,
Yes.
because people have realized that it's passive income.
Yes.
And a lot of music artists have also realized that, hey, I've just been making beats and putting
Right.
them in a folder. Well, I can make some money off of this.
I see.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you're very modest, and we appreciate the humility. Tell us some of the movies that you've been able to get placement for your artists and other people for. The ones that we can talk about.
Yes. Just got a really big one that I can't really talk about. Major
Right.
studio one that we just got last week. Can't really talk about, but I'm really excited for that one. But we've done Pinocchio,
Which is
Pinocchio
with?
trailer. Yeah, Disney.
Disney,
Yep.
okay.
We did the Pinocchio trailer. We let's see, Bounty paper towels. What is this? Vitamin water.
Sure.
Now, as far as movies, let's see. Some movies, Wonder Woman.
Yes.
Oh man, Hillbilly Elegy.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh man, that's crazy because nobody ever asked me this. I never think about it. But yeah, those are some really big ones there.
Sure. Yeah. So definitely pretty big, pretty epic, and we'll play some of the soundtrack type of music to this, so you can really see that these composers are writing for very large entities and things like that. And just talk to us sort of about the process of working with your artists to get that, because many times, like you said, that's all that they have is a general sense as to what the movie could be like. Like we'll pick Pinocchio since that's one of the more recent ones. What is that like, sort of some of those conversations with the musician or the artist? Because in this case, they were composing specifically for the brief.
Yes. So usually those are exclusive deals with that studio.
Right.
Okay. So what I try to do is get the composer to stay true to the art.
Right.
Because once they start composing just to get placement, they lose the artistic element of the music. You know what I mean? And they're not art. They lose a sense of what the art is in the music. So I just take what I take what they have, and I really try to get them to stay who they are, stay true to who they are as an artist. But what that looks like, technically, is the conversation is, okay, we have this big project. It cannot be talked about until it's released.
Yes.
But this is exclusive. This is, so there's certain things that we can say once we are allowed to talk about it, and there's certain things we cannot say. But we go through the contracting. A lot of times I will do, if real instruments are a demand for this project, I will schedule the stage, schedule the orchestra, the music editor, make sure that that they are recording what is needed, because what they have to do is they're recording cues.
Right.
So each cue has to be checked off. Once they get it, it's almost like you taking notes when you're in, if you're segment producing a television show, you have notes, you have a checklist to make sure that, we hit these conversational points and these bullet points. And so once you know that you hit those bullet points, you can check off and move on to the next one. So recording cues is the same thing. So I handle all of scheduling, all of that, do the negotiating of the contracts, and then the whole back and forth. Sometimes the composer's not very comfortable with what the studio is offering. Just depends on how much work goes into a bespoke project, which means custom project. That means they made it from scratch. So a lot of work goes into it. So now, I'm going back and forth with the numbers. I don't have problems talking about money.
Sure, right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So I could talk about the money. Okay, how much this gonna cost?
Right, sure.
Right.
Let's be honest.
And what's your budget?
Sure, right, exactly.
So I'm very comfortable with those conversations.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so one of the last things I wanted to discuss was just the challenges, though, that you face, because it's a lot of pressure, and that includes time, not just the obvious pressure of the finances, but turnaround time on these. And so what are some of the challenges you faced in that regard in trying to get these placements?
One of the main challenges that I face is not having, there are always aggressive deadlines.
Right.
So when there are aggressive deadlines, before we even get the brief, I have to make sure that everything that involves the music is as far as metadata is robust enough to submit the music. And what that means is all of the unique identifiers of the music. Who wrote it, who composed it, who engineered it, who wrote the lyrics, the beats per minute, the year it was released. All of those things have to be embedded in the audio file. And when it's not embedded in the audio file, and you have a very aggressive deadline, and you have to go and look for this, creative people don't think about these things.
Right.
They just want to create,
right.
So when I have to go and look for these things, it makes it even more challenging to meet the deadline. So when I'm given a deadline from the studio, I'll add my own date. So I'll add maybe a couple days earlier or a week earlier, just because creatives are creatives and they don't think about these things, but so that's one of the main things that I face.
Right, and I want to break that down because sometimes somebody will try to slip something through with sometimes there's a few notes that aren't theirs. So I'm just trying to call a spade, and talk to us about sort of those challenges if that sort of gets found in this process.
Yes. I look for that.
Sure.
I look for that, especially when you're dealing with samples. So there's a lot of music libraries out there that will, platforms that house samples. And what a sample is a snippet of music that we use to enhance a whole song or a music works or whatever. People use samples all the time.
Right.
But the original composer and artist of that sample must be credited.
Right.
And I can hear a sample.
Right.
Even if I'm not very familiar with the song, I'll ask the artist, is there a sample in this? And sometimes they'll say yes and sometimes they'll say no. So, when it's a no, I'm like, are you sure? Right. So there are also, because that's a legal liability down the line, not crediting, not paying for the sample, not paying for the clearance to use the sample, so forth and so on. So I'm always looking for that type of stuff. But you're right, people do try to slip through the cracks, but I'm on behind.
About it. Yeah. Talk to us about some of those controversies that we hear that kind of do trickle up well beyond, because there's a legal case every day about something being sampled, but only a few really sort of make it to the big news. Just sort of how that process sort of goes awry, because as you stated from the very beginning, and we were really talking about supergenesis. I mean, you're starting to level a brief long before anybody's going to ever hear this, long before it's ever going to radio or TV or streaming, looking for this process, trying to make sure that nothing is included. How do those kinds of things get overlooked, such that a major star may say, I didn't know, I wasn't aware, or I don't think I was compensated appropriately?
It gets overlooked because people just they don't do their due diligence. I mean, you almost have to, go above and beyond to just make sure all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, because it is so expensive down the line if you get sued for infringement upon somebody else's right,
Right.
using somebody else's intellectual property, I wouldn't want that done to me. So don't just use my name or my intellectual property without making absolute sure that you have permission to do so. So it's really about going above and beyond, just double checking, that you have all that stuff cleared, But usually if a person is using a sample from a music library, they are paying for a subscription to license that sample.
Right.
They're not paying for exclusive rights to that audio file. They're they can license it and put it in their song, but somebody else can too.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
Right, so it's available.
Yeah.
And the last take home is a message for somebody that may be coming up and that's thinking about doing some of the kind of work you're doing. What do you feel these years of experience have taught you that you want to pass on to someone else?
What I would want to pass on to someone else is do what makes you happy. Get good at doing what makes you happy, and not necessarily at what someone else's idea of you. That's always been a thing with me because I was a performer as a child, and so I was always asked to perform in front of people and all of these different things, and didn't like it. I'm a little bit more cerebral than that. So I'm always in my head like, why? No, why?
Right.
Why?
Right.
Just why?
Right.
And just so I think just staying true to who you are, what you want to do, what makes you happy. Versus what satisfying someone else's idea of what you do. Just because you may have a talent, doesn't mean that's you want to use your talent in the way that someone else sees fit that you use it.
Absolutely,
Sure.
yeah. And I think that's simple and yet profound, because I think a lot of artists, we often hear that sort of further down the road. They may have been whispering it or saying it before, but sometimes when we see them walk away, or when we see they're upset, when we see that they want to be out of a contract, many times this is what bubbles to the surface, that they're not getting to express themselves or do the things they really wanted to do, but they were sort of told, nope, you have to do this, or look this way, or dress this way, or sing this type of music. So.
Yeah, I was always told, oh, get a 9 to 5. I don't want to do that.
Sure. That's
Why?
Right.
I don't want to do that.
Right.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
so that's
Well, thanks so much for sharing. I love being able to work with you. I love all the information you've brought, not only today, but just for me as well. So thanks so much for your
Thank you
time and your
so
insight.
much.
Sure, absolutely a pleasure. Welcome to Music and Medicine. Welcome to Music and Medicine. Welcome to Music and Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Moshe Lewis.